Hello dear students, today's our topic is conductors and insulators. So we'll discuss these two terms, conductors and insulators. So as you know that there are two types of electrical substances. Some substance in which electric current, electric charges can flow, and in others no electric charges can flow. So on the basis of this, whether the electricity is passing or not, or all the electrical substances have been divided into two types. What are these two types? These two types are called conductors and insulators. So we will write the definition here. Conductors are the substances. Conductors are the substances through which electric charges can flow. So they allow the electric charges to flow through them, and these substances are called conductors. As you know that the flow of electric charges is called electricity. So we can also define conductors or the substances. Conductors are the substances which allow electricity to flow through them. So those substances which allow electricity to flow through them, in simple words we can say that those substances in which electricity can pass, electric charges can pass, such substances are called conductors. Now we will take some examples here. The examples of conductors here, as you know that, so first example, all metals are what? These are conductors. For example, we will take some metals here like silver. The symbol of silver is Ag. In the same way, aluminium. In the same way, copper. These are the best known metals, and these metals are conductors. Why these are conductors? Because they can allow the electric current to flow through them. Number second example of these conductors is all alloys. What are alloys? Alloys are homogeneous mixtures of some metals. When metals are get combined together, they form a substance. That substance is called alloy. Like here we have an example of alloy here, nichrome. Nichrome is an alloy which is alloy of nickel and chromium. This is the well-known example of alloy, and this alloy, nichrome, it's used to make the heating elements of electrical appliances. For example, heaters, boilers. The coil present in these electrical appliances is made up of nichrome. It is one of the alloy which is the conductor of electricity, which allow the electricity to flow through it. Number third example of this conductor, human body. Human body is also a conductor. In the same way, fourth example, carbon in the form of graphite. As you know that this carbon, it exists in many allotropic forms. For example, diamond, graphite, fullerenes, and among these graphite is called the conductor of electricity, because this graphite contains free electrons which can move from one side to another side, from one atom to another atom, and due to the movement of these electrons, free electrons, this graphite becomes the good conductor of electricity, or we can say that it's a conductor of electricity through which electricity can pass. Now this was the definition of conductor. Second term which is related to this topic, that's called insulator. What's an insulator? The opposite of conductor. So what are insulators? Insulators are the substances through which electric charges cannot cannot flow. So those substances through which electrical charges or simply electric charges cannot flow. These substances do not allow the electricity to flow through them. Such substances are called insulators. Those substances through which electricity cannot pass. So they remain the bad conductors. So that's when they are bad conductors, they are simply called as insulators. So insulators resist to the flow of electric charges, to the flow of electricity through them. So they don't conduct electricity. So such substances are called insulators. We have many examples here. For example, paper. Paper is the insulator. In the same way, rubber. In the same way, many plastics. In the same way, bakelite. It is one of the polymer. Copolymer. Sorry, it is copolymer. In the same way, we have many more examples. Mica. Paper. तो आ गए. In the same way, we have rubber, plastic, polymers, dry wood. Dry wood is also an example of insulator. In the same way, we have dry air, etc., etc. So these are various examples of insulators. They don't allow the electricity to pass through them. For example, paper, rubber, plastics, bakelite, mica, polymers, dry wood, dry air. These are the examples of insulators. Now, a question arises here. Why some substances are conductors and why some substances are insulators? Why some substances allow the electricity to pass through them and why some substances cannot pass, through which electricity cannot pass? What is the reason behind it? As you know that all substances, whether it is a conductor or insulator, are made up of electrons, Their atoms contain electrons. When it's the case of conductor, in these conductors, there is the presence of free electrons. What are free electrons? As you know that whether it is conductor or insulator, both are made up of electrons. Now, what is the difference between the, since they also contain electron, but in case of conductors, they contain free electrons, whereas in case of insulators, they do not contain free electrons. Why? And in case of conductors, the reason behind is that in case of conductors, their electrons are loosely held to the nucleus. When their electrons are loosely held to the nucleus, they can easily flow from one atom to another atom. So when the electrons are easily flowing, that means they are free. When they are free, that's why they are called free electrons. In case of insulators, they also contain electrons, but their electrons are held tightly. Towards the nucleus. They are not free to move. When they are not free to move, there is no flow of electric charges. So this is actually the reason behind it. In case of conductors, they contain free electrons, whereas in case of insulators, they do not contain free electrons. So we can say that no free electrons. So this is actually the reason behind it. Why some substances are conductors and why some substances are insulators. And second topic is there, that is, which is related to this, types of electricity. There are two types of electricity. First is, that is static electricity. Second is, that's called current electricity. These are the two types of electricity. So first is static electricity, second is current electricity. What is static electricity? This is that type of electricity in which charges remain at rest. Or we can say that charges are stationary, they do not move. So when the charges remain at rest, stationary, they do not move, that electricity, that that electricity is called static electricity. Now, what are the various examples of static electricity? Various examples: the lightning which we see in the sky during the rainy season. During the rainy season, that involves static electricity. So the lightning which we see in the sky during the rainy season is an example of static electricity, and the charge occurred by the comb when it is rubbed with dry hair. And the charge occurred by ebonite rod when it or the charge which is occurred by the glass rod or rubbing with silk cloth. That's an example of static electricity. So these were the various examples of static electricity. Now, what is current electricity? Current electricity is that electricity in which electric charges are in motion. In which electric charges are in motion. They do move. They can move from one side to another side. That is called the current electricity. The electricity which we use in our homes, that's the best example of current electricity. So in this unit, we generally are referring to the current electricity. When we talk about the electricity, it simply means current electricity, because in current electricity, electric charges are in motion. They constitute the electric current. So when electric charges are in motion, we call it at the current electricity. When the electric charges are at rest, we call that as the static electricity. The example of current electricity is simply the electricity which is flowing through the wires. That is the best example of current electricity. And the example of static electricity is that the lightning which we see in the sky during the rainy season, that involves the static electricity. And the electricity which is occurred by the glass rod, and which is occurred by the comb, which is occurred by the glass rod, which is occurred by the ebonite rod on rubbing with different items, these all involves the examples of static electricity. I hope that you are understanding it wholly and solely. Okay.